I know by now we've all seen Nosferatu, or at least a good portion of us has. To say we are obsessed is an understatement. Like the cinematography, the costume design, everything was amazing. There are some scenes in the movie that was a bit unnecessary, but yeah, it is what it is.
Back to the costume design, I was really obsessed. And yeah, I decided to make this nightgown inspired by the one Ellen was wearing. So if you want to have your Nosferatu fantasy, keep watching because I'm going to show you how you can make one for yourself. So for today's project, I will be using this cotton bed sheet. I really love the fact that it has this lace. I wanted to use linen because I think they used either linen or organic cotton to make a nightgown, but I couldn't wait. I wanted to do it now. I actually went to Joann to look for linen fabric but couldn't find any good quality one, and the ones they had in store were very expensive and the quality is not that great. So I decided to go to the thrift store and I found this. I made sure to sanitize it before using it because you never know. If you hear any background noise, just ignore, okay? But now, how are you going to ignore it? I've already drawn your attention to it, please. But anyways, this first part is not really necessary, but what I did was separate the lace from the actual fabric. I'm going to use this lace trim for the neckline, and I will use the lace I removed from the bedsheet for the sleeves. I also thought some flower appliques would be like a good add-on, but did not end up using them. You can do whatever you want to yours. So first thing we're going to do is determine the length and width of our gown. You can make yours as long as you want depending on how much of a freak you are, you know, but I measure mine to 54 inches including seam allowance. Next thing I did was measure my width to 84-ish. I ended up ripping the side of the bed sheet, so we have like an added 4 inches to the width. It is also advisable to watch the video to the end before you start working on your own gown. I then pressed and divided the fabric into two, one for the front piece and one for the back piece. From here we're going to move on to cutting out a pattern. This is just a rough draft I made to determine the pattern before making the gown. You can use it as a guide, I guess, but I'm going to show you how to make it. To create the pattern, you're going to need these measurements. I do not want to complicate things, so I'm just going to put the measurement you're going to need for the dress before we move on to the sleeve. The measurements are not a lot and you don't really have to be too critical. This is like a fun, easy sewing project. It's a nightgown. Moving on to cutting out the pattern for the gown, we're going to start with the front piece. First thing you want to do is fold your fabric into half like so. Next, I'm going to mark an inch from the side. From where I've marked, I'm going to add my shoulder length plus 3/8 of an inch for the armhole seam allowance. And from the top, I'm going to mark half an inch like so. From where I've marked, I'm going to mark 1/2 of my armhole measurement. Now, do not follow the armhole measurement because it's way too big. I had to adjust it later. And just for reference, I wear a size small and I'm 5'4". So if you think we wear the same size and have the same height, you can just use my measurement. This next part is self-explanatory. I'm just going to cut out where I've marked. Here, I was just making sure that it's still 1 inch from the side. From here, I'm going to cut from the top diagonally to the armpit. I'm going to add a seam allowance of 3/8 of an inch for the neckline. From where I've just marked, I'm going to mark 6 inches down with a pin and 6 inches down on the other side. Next thing I'm going to do is cut out a neckline. You can see that the neckline is very wide. That's because we are going to make it into gathers. And voila, we are done with the front pattern. Now I'm just going to pin everything together and use that pattern as a guide to cut out the back piece. So this is what your pattern should be looking like. Mind you, both pieces are folded in half and I pinned them together just so the fabric won't move. You can see the depth of the neck for the front piece is a little bit deeper than the depth of the neck for the back piece. So these are the measurements you're going to need for the sleeve. Now that we have our sleeve measurement, you're going to measure the length of the sleeve. You see, I started measuring from where the lace is because I'm going to add it to the fabric, so which means I have to cut from 28 to 5 inches. I added 3/8 of an inch for seam allowance because I will be sewing the lace and the fabric together. Next, you're going to measure the width of the sleeve. Mine is 22 inches, including seam allowance. And mind you, the wideness of the sleeve should be larger than the wideness of the armhole. So now that we've determined the length and wideness of the sleeve, we're going to fold both pieces in halves. Next, I pin everything together in order to secure the fabric. Now you're going to mark 2 inches from the top like I'm doing in the video and cut diagonally. Mark 1.5 inches from the side, the bottom side, and cut diagonally. Next thing I'm going to do is add the lace to the sleeve. To do that, I'm just going to use the sleeve as a guide to cut out the lace fabric. I had some leftover fabric after I was done cutting out the pattern for the dress and the gown, so I decided to make some granny panties from them. You don't have to follow this tutorial. You can just skip to the main tutorial you click this video for. I am using one of my old patterns to make these. I did not really consider the grain of the fabric since they're gonna be like free anyway, and I didn't have a lot of fabric to work with. After I was done cutting out the patterns, I pin everything together and then start sewing. I decided to add another layer of fabric on the crotch area. Make sure the wrong side of the first one and the wrong side of the second one are facing each other. So you're going to pin that together like so, and then sandwich the other fabric, the front and the back side of the panty in the middle, and then pin on the other side. There we go. My needle is too big for this fabric. What I'm gonna do. See, now we have this. You can see the seams. How beautiful that is. While I'm at the sewing machine, I'm just going to like sew the sides to secure the fabric. Keep them in place, yeah? Nice. Next, we're going to sew the sides, and we're going to be using the French seam technique. To do that, you're just going to put your fabric together, making sure the wrong sides are facing each other, and then you're going to sew. So after sewing the sides together, you're going to clean out all the excess fabric, leaving 1/8 of an inch. After that, you're going to press with an iron. After pressing the seam, you're going to turn it inside out, now with the good sides of the fabrics facing each other, and then you're going to press one more time before sewing. After pressing the seam for the second time, you're going to sew, leaving 1/8 of an inch for seam allowance or 2/8 of an inch for seam allowance, just to be safe. And just like that, you have a really clean seam. Very beautiful.
So next, I clean out all the threads and excess fabrics before serging the legs and waist. Unfortunately, I didn't record attaching the elastic band, but I'm going to explain. Hopefully you will understand. You want to make sure the elastic band is 2.5 inches smaller than the circumference of the legs, and the elastic band for the waist is 2.5 smaller than the circumference of the waist. First of all, while making this, I think something I failed to mention is you have to make sure the panties are a size or two bigger than your regular panty size. After that, you're going to divide the circle you're dealing with into 4 equal sections and divide the elastic band for that circle into 4 equal sections as well. You're going to pin the places you've marked on the elastic band on the places you've marked on the circle you're dealing with. So we do this mainly to have an equal distribution of elasticity on the area attaching the elastic band. After that, you're going to stretch the elastic to fit the area where you're sewing, with the good side of the elastic band and the good side of the fabric facing each other, while the lace or trimming area of the elastic band is facing downwards. And after that, you're going to fold and then do a zigzag stitch.
I added a cute flower applique. Look at how beautiful that is, and it's so comfortable. But anyways, now that we're done with that, back to the main tutorial. I attached the lace to the bottom part of the sleeve with pins, and then I'm gonna sew that. I'm going to serge that. So next thing I'm going to do is increase my stitch length to create the wrist gathers, the gathers on the wrist. To do that, you're just going to sew 2 straight lines 3/8 of an inch apart from each other. Pull the loose thread. It could be like the top thread or the bottom thread, but just make sure if you're pulling the top thread, it's the top thread you're pulling for both stitches. And you have to be very patient, be very careful, because you don't want to be pulling the thread after making your gathers and you mistaken work a thread. You have to start all over again. So normally what I advise, if like you're not really used to it, you can pull from one side, and then when you have like enough gathers, you pull the thread from the other side. So now that we have our gathers, you're going to use an elastic. Measure your wrist and cut the elastic. Make sure the elastic is like 1 to 1.5 inches smaller than the length of the gathers. And then you're going to sew carefully. You have to be really patient with this one, okay? When you're sewing, make sure you're sewing between the 2 threads you previously made, because you're going to pull those loose threads later. Now we have our gathers. After that, I just remove the excess threads. I love clean work, so I always remove threads when I'm sewing, okay? It makes your work look better. Now you're going to fold the sleeve in half and pin everything in place. And voila, we have our sleeves. It's that easy. Now we're going to move on to the dress. we're going to use the same technique for making the gathers for the neckline. I'm going to pause the video here and show you where you're going to sew the 2 stitches. And again, you're going to pull threads really carefully. And with this one, when you're pulling the thread, you want to make sure most of the gathers are concentrated in the middle of the neckline, okay? While you have just small gather towards the arm, but most of the gathers should be in the middle of the neckline. After that, I'm going to reduce my stitch length to 2.5 and make a regular stitch in between the stitches we use to make the gather, just to secure the gathers. So we're going to sew the shoulders together using the French seam technique. Remember, first long side facing each other. You cut out the excess fabric, leaving 1/8 of an inch. And then you turn the garment inside out. Press the garment, turn it inside out, press it, and then sew 1/8 of an inch. I am going to add my lace. You're just going to cut out your lace and make sure it's the same size as the
neck roundness,
and then pin it in place. Make sure all the sides are equal. Make sure the good side of the lace is facing the good side of the garment, and make sure the upper part of the lace is turned downward of the garment, and then you're going to sew. You don't really have to do this part before we go to the next part, but I like a clean work, okay? So I'm going to add another fabric, like a bias. You can use a bias on top, making sure the lace is in the middle, and then sew that. After that, I'm going to remove the excess fabric, leaving about 6/8 of an inch. And next, I'm just going to fold that. As I said before, you don't really need to add this bias. You can just fold it after adding the lace. I know it sounds really complicated, but while you're making your own, you'll see everything makes sense, okay? So you're going to fold that and sew about 2/8 of an inch from where you just attached the lace.
I use the previous French seam technique to sew the sides of the garment. I then move on to hemming the drape of the garment. To do that, you're going to fold 3/8 of an inch 2 times and then sew. We are finally at the last step of making this nightgown, which is attaching the sleeves. To attach a sleeve, the first thing you're going to do is gather the sleeve into the measurement of the arm roundness, because remember, while cutting out the sleeve pattern, we made sure the wideness of the sleeve is a bit larger than the wideness of the armhole. And when making the garters, make sure most of the garters are focused towards the shoulder tip of the sleeve. There's still going to be garters on the sides, but just make sure most of the garters are focused on the top. Next, we're going to turn both sleeves inside out. We will be using the same French seam for attaching the sleeves as well. So you're going to take the sleeve and tuck it inside the armhole, making sure the wrong side of the dress and the wrong side of the sleeve are facing each other. You're going to match the side seam of the dress and the side seam of the sleeve together and then pin. After pinning everything together, check to see everything is equal and then sew round. Remember, we're doing a French seam to attach the sleeve, so you're going to cut off all the excess fabric, leaving 1/8 of an inch. Next, you're going to pull the sleeve from inside the dress to the armhole with the good side of the dress and the good side of the sleeve facing each other. You're going to sew from inside the dress, but first make sure you remove all the excess fabric, especially on the armpits area. When doing French seam, it is always advisable to press this part before sewing, but I was getting tired and just wanted to get this over with. And yes, that's my tummy growling because I need to go eat, but I want to get this over with. I want to upload this video today. And just like that, you're done with your Ellen Hutter inspired nightgown. Now wear that every night and haunt whichever little castle you live in. I pray and hope Nosferatu never ever visits you. Thank you so much for hanging out with me today. I also hope you enjoyed this video. If you do, give this video a thumbs up, and if you want to see more videos like this from this channel, subscribe, and hopefully I get to see you again next week.